So while most of us are familiar with the problem of storefront payday lending and the now more than a decade and a half effort to address this, payday lending is part of a larger problem, predatory lending, which comes in many forms. There are many different ways Rhode Island consumers are at risk from companies seeking to extract money from us by charging interest rates, including triple-digit interest rates in many cases. Interest rates above the 21% to 36% protective interest rate limits policymakers in Rhode Island set into statute long ago. So even after we finally enact storefront payday lending reform this year, there will, unfortunately, be an ongoing need for consumer protection, especially on the state level, given the attacks on the Federal Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. The Rhode Island Coalition for Predatory Lending Reform and the Economic Progress Institute will continue to work with local partners and national ones, including the Center for Responsible Lending and the National Consumer Law Center, to make sure Rhode Island statute includes strong consumer protection rules. This year, the Coalition is aiming to protect Rhode Island consumers through two sets of bills, and today we will be discussing these. H5042 and S229 will repeal the special carve-out in state law that allows storefront payday lenders to charge 260% annual percentage rate. And H6055 and S386 address fintech companies that try to use out-of-state banks to evade our state's interest rate limits. Many have been focused for more than a decade and a half now on the first part, and we plan to get this enacted this year, but we should not wait that long to institute the protections provided by the second set of bills. We should enact both sets of bills this year. So first we'll talk about the payday lending, and then we'll talk about the other predatory lending. Some years ago, Senator Ana Quezada, lead sponsor of S229, took the baton from Senator Howard Metz to lead the fight in the Senate on storefront payday lending reform. Senator Quezada is out of the country this week, and she asked Senator Tara Mack, another champion of this effort, the co-chair of the repeal caucus, to speak on her behalf. So, Senator Mack.
Hi everyone, I am Senator Mack, and I am proud to be standing in for my colleague in the Senate who's been a champion of this bill for a few years. Payday lending is quite simply a debt trap for families. This is living in the country, the richest country in the history of the world, where many businesses and practices have led to the systemic siphoning of wealth from low-income people. It is really easy to make money on low-income people in our country. The payday loan industry itself is worth an estimated $2.4 billion in revenue, extracting hope and opportunity from communities like mine. The lack of banking in our communities further causes economic disparity, widens the opportunity gap for low-income Rhode Islanders to get ahead in life. My own story as a low-income person growing up, I've seen my mom trapped in not a payday lending scheme, but a title loan scheme, which fortunately title loans are not allowed in Rhode Island. For a $5,000 loan that my mom got on her car 3 years ago, in 2 years she will have paid $27,000 for a $5,000 loan. These are quite simply predatory practices for low-income people who have no other option for income. But there are options. Since 2018, many of the largest banks, 6 of the largest banks in our country, have started having small dollar donor programs. Establishing relationships with banks, especially for low-income or low-credit people, either at established large banks or at credit unions, is now a new option to enable them to establish credit and establishing banking relationships. Imagine a small loan for a woman today of young children is a small business startup loan for that same person after she established a banking relationship with the bank in her community that didn't charge her over 200% interest in that loan. As co-chair of the Rhode Island Black and Latino Caucus, we are championing this piece of legislation and have made it part of our priority list, representing 21 members between the House and the Senate, because we know our communities are exactly where these storefronts or payday lending are placed. People like me and communities like the ones that we represent all across the state have these predatory practices and have less opportunities for Rhode Islanders to establish banks and to build business with Rhode Island-based banks and credit unions in our state. For too long, our communities have been considered unbankable. But the truth is that many of the folks who participate in payday lending do have banking accounts. What they have is a lack of access to low credit limit or low credit score options that allow them to establish a credit history, allow them to get ahead, and allow them to establish credit history. Many people think that not having a great credit score is a product of your own upbringing or a product of your own misfortune or your failures as an individual, but a lot of it is systemic. As someone who grew up in a low-income family, in order to get my first credit card, in order to establish my own credit, I couldn't do things like pay rent. I couldn't do things like go to the grocery store. I had to get a low-dollar secured credit card for $500 before I could establish my own credit. Whereas many people who have families that have a history of credit can add their children as an authorized user, establish credit from a young age, or set up a credit account for them when they are minors or before they reach the age where they'll be able to use spending on their own. So a lot of this is about correcting some of the historic and systemic wrongs in our community, but allowing communities like mine to be seen as bankable, to establish banks in our communities that will provide them with some loans and credit limits in the sizes of anywhere between $750 and up to $1,000. And again, there are already banks in Rhode Island, some of them who are here today, who have established these alternatives, and shifting the narrative from our communities being seen as unbankable to establishing the precedent that anybody, anywhere can establish necessary credit to get themselves on the right track and to correct some of the systemic harms in our communities by establishing pathways for them to see themselves in their community, starting a potential small business, refinancing a home, purchasing their first home, or even something as simple as financing their first car. So we are really proud to be able to continue to champion this piece of legislation. It's been many years in the making, and as the national context and climate continues to change, especially with the recent law that was passed to increase the overdraft fees for folks at the federal level, this is going to continue to have an impact on low-income Rhode Islanders and low-income people. And as the spokesperson and spokespeople and champions for Rhode Island's Black, Indigenous, Latino, and AAPI community, we are proud to continue to push this and move forward with all of our community members. So thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Senator Mack. Representative Karen Alzate, the lead sponsor of H5042, has been a champion of this effort for a number of years, including ushering the bill with the help of Speaker Scarchy to the House floor in 2023, where it passed with a tripartisan Democrat, Republican, Independent majority of 70 votes in support and only 2 against.
Here we are again. Thank you so much for having us here today, and thank you so much to Senator Mack for her words and filling in for Senator Quesada. So we're standing on the edge of a financial cliff, and some of us already fell off, especially many of Rhode Islanders and many in my communities, both Pawtucket and Central Falls. Every single day, hardworking Rhode Islanders walk into payday lenders hoping for some help. And they walk out not knowing that they just jumped on a merry-go-round in a cycle of debt that they may never escape. These predatory lenders are not offering a lifeline, although it feels that way when you're in an emergency. They are tying a cinder block into the ankles of our most vulnerable and pushing them deeper into financial ruin. This is not just a money issue. This is a moral one. We know that the damage that these loans do, triple-digit interest rates, endless rollovers, a debt trap that preys on desperation, a merry-go-round. And in this economy, under this unstable presidential administration, where economic uncertainty looms like a storm over every household, we cannot afford to ignore this any longer, or better yet, wait another 90 days. We are not powerless in the face of this problem. There are safer, more sustainable alternatives, like credit unions, who you'll hear from, community-based lenders, nonprofit programs that provide small loans with terms designed to help, not to hurt. In a time of economic uncertainty, when so many people are already stretched so thin, and in the national political landscape offers little predictability, I don't know, I can't say it. you know what I mean. It's more important than ever that we act at the state level to provide real, responsible solutions. By passing payday lending, we know we have the supports. We can help Rhode Islanders we can help stop and protect Rhode Islanders from falling deeper into debt. We can show that we are listening and that we care and they are willing to come together across differences to do what's right. Rhode Islanders must lead. We must pass meaningful payday lending reform and not next year. Let's finally break the cycle of debt and allow our residents to get off this merry-go-round and have a real shot at freedom. The clock is ticking, Rhode Island. The damage is mounting and the people are watching. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Alzate. Jessica Vega is the Senior Advocacy and Community Engagement Manager for Rhode Island Kids Count, and I want to express my gratitude to her for sharing again what she has shared previously at committee hearings and elsewhere about her personal experience with payday lending.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As Alan mentioned, my name is Jessica Vega. I'm a Senior Policy Analyst at Rhode Island Kids Count, but I'm also here as an advocate and someone who personally experienced the predatory nature of payday loans. In my early 20s, I thought I was doing everything I was supposed to do. I was working hard, paying my bills, and striving for independence. I was on cloud nine because as an immigrant, I was the first one in my family to graduate Rhode Island College, or college in general, with a bachelor's degree in psychology. And shortly after, I moved into my first apartment in Pawtucket. But like so many young people, I quickly realized that my paycheck did not stretch far enough. So there were things like I had to pay rent, and my car payment, and my car insurance, and food, and other basic necessities. And I found myself in a financial bind. At the time, it seemed like a really quick and easy solution going through a payday lender. I walked in, I showed my ID, there were no real questions asked, and I left with cash. What I didn't realize is that I was entering a cycle of financial debt that consumed my life for over a year. When it came time to pay off, I didn't have the money. The same financial situation that I found myself 2 weeks ago, going into the payday lending center, was the same situation I found myself the date that I had to pay back the loan. So I found myself re-borrowing the money I had just paid back. And when things got really bad, I had to go to a different payday lender to pay off the first one. So I was essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul. What I had to do to get off the cycle was to pick up a second job. And I had to move back into my mom's apartment, already cramped apartment. Thankfully, I had the family support. My mom was able to turn the living room into my bedroom and the dining room into the living room. It took me a year to pay off the loan. That was the only way I was able to break free. I think I was lucky because I have my family support, but there are plenty of Rhode Islanders, single moms, people with disabilities who don't have the same family support and financial stability as I have the privilege to do to take on more work. Payday lenders claim they provide a service or a lifeline to families, but what they really do is trap people in a cycle of debt, charging the equivalent of 260% of interest rate annually. At the time, I didn't know there were other alternatives like credit unions who were able to support me. For decades, advocates have been fighting to cap payday lending rates and protect Rhode Islanders from financial exploitation. The bill is a critical step forward to ending predatory practices that disproportionately harm low-income communities and Black and brown families. Last year was the first time I shared my story when it came to payday lending. I held back because there's so much taboo when it comes to financial situations. But today I stand before you because I think this is personal for me. It happened to me and it's happening to hundreds of families here in the state of Rhode Island. We must put an end to payday predatory lending. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Next, I'd like to invite up General Treasurer Diosa, who has been champion of payday lending reform and other efforts to protect Rhode Island consumers in financial matters.
It's great to be with so many colleagues here supporting such an important effort that impacts every corner of Rhode Island. And I want to extend my sincere thanks to the Rhode Island Coalition for Predatory Lending Reform for hosting this event. Today, I want to talk about the damaging impact of payday lending in our state. Many borrowers find themselves trapped in a cycle of debt fueled by high fees and excessive interest rates. As many of you know, I was the mayor of Central Falls, and this became a practice by many families in the community. And sometimes when you talk to these families, you think it's thousands of dollars that they're asking these payday lendings for alone. It's just a few $100, but because of the predatory nature of these loans, they get stuck, really stuck. And I want to acknowledge a great partner during that time when I was mayor, and that was Carlos Vargas and Advocate Credit Union. They stepped up. They offered the ability for many in our communities to come in, especially on our undocumented families to come and get a small loan, cash a check for free, etc. So I want to thank them. And I've always been a proud supporter of these bills because, again, of the nature of the circumstances that these predatory lending practices have, but also it's just the right thing, as many of my colleagues before me said. And over 2 decades ago, the General Assembly amended state law to allow payday lending practices. The prevailing law somewhat restrains these lending practices. Payday lenders are permitted to charge an astonishing 260% annual percentage rate before fees. By comparison, every other New England state either caps payday lending at 36% or prohibits the practice entirely. Rhode Island needs to step up. And as mentioned before, we can't have our neighbors trapped in these cycles of debt. And as treasurer, I remain committed to doing all that I can to financially educate and empower Rhode Islanders, whether through the purchase of medical debt or just a simple education of financial literacy. We want to stay on top of this so that we can continue liberating families and create generational wealth. Alongside, my main priority in both chambers this year is baby bonds, where we can deposit $3,000 into an account for every child that's born into the Rhode Island Works program and help build wealth in our communities. So today I urge you all to join us in advocating for change. Together we can push for policies that protect Rhode Islanders from these predatory practices. And I know that the language is pretty straightforward, black and white, but the way we will continue to educate and convince people is by sharing these real stories of how this happens. Just a few bucks. It's not a lot. It's $100, $200. They get stuck in the cycle of debt. And so we need to tell these folks about the real impact that it has in our community. But also, I'm pretty sure if we were able to poll Rhode Islanders today and we said, listen, do you believe that we should step up like every other New England state and copy their language of legislation to cap at 36 or prohibit the entire practice at all, you'll see there'll be tremendous support around our fellow Rhode Islanders around the state. So thank you again. Let's get this done. Again, the Representative's office said, we're here again. We're here again. And it's time to get this passed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Issa. I just want to note in terms of the legislation, 5042 and 229, that doesn't prohibit payday lenders from having a storefront. Right? It just says, it just repeals the statute that gives them a carve out from state law that applies to other lenders. So just saying, play by the same interest rate rules that other lenders play by, and if you want to accept that, that's fine. Now, perhaps the most frequent argument we hear against payday lending reform is the disproven claim that there are no small loan product alternatives to storefront payday loans. Never mind that we heard the other 5 New England states manage without storefront payday lending. Never mind that storefront payday lenders are offering an opportunity for debt rather than credit, as we've heard. And one of the flyers we have in the back presents a number of alternatives loan products, including one from Rhode Island's own Navigant Credit Union. And now I'd like to welcome Carlos Vargas, Navigant's Assistant Vice President of Community Development.
Good afternoon. My name is Carlos Vargas, and I serve as the Assistant Vice President for Community Development at Navigant Credit Union. Navigant Credit Union was founded 110 years ago by community members with a mission to provide financially underserved mill workers access to products and services that would help them achieve financial independence. Today, we continue that legacy, serving our communities and working to solve local challenges. I want to talk to you about an alternative that we have. So Navigate Credit Union Smart Start Loan is a great alternative to traditional payday loans. To qualify, you must simply become a Navigate Credit Union member. You must have 4 consecutive direct deposits into your account. We do not pull credit, so credit's not a barrier to this loan. And the loan is capped at 18%. You can take as long as 3 months to repay, but there is no prepayment penalty, and there is a small $20 application fee. You can borrow between $200 to $600, and you may take advantage of this loan up to 2 times. We limit the number of loans to help prevent members from falling into a cycle of debt. We don't want to create another cycle of debt. After 2 loans of $600 or less, you may apply for one final loan of up to $1,000, and you can take as long as 12 months to repay this loan if you still need assistance. The important part to note is that during this process, we will provide you with credit counseling and financial literacy resources to help you create a plan to improve your financial situation so that by the time you reach 1, 2, or 3 loans, we want to ensure that you have a clear path forward, helping you move beyond the circumstances that have led you to seek this assistance. And we do this because at Navigate Credit Union, we are committed to serve to the financial well-being of the communities that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that information with us. So now let's shift focus to the second set of bills addressing what is called the rent-a-bank scheme. And one of the flyers available today in the back presents information on this scheme. Senator Melissa Murray, lead sponsor of S386, and Representative Brandon Potter, lead sponsor of H6055, have been passionate advocates of this legislation since we first started working together on this for the 2024 legislative session. I'll first invite Senator Murray to discuss the legislation in the Senate.
Thank you so much, Alan, and thank you for everybody for being here and having me speak on this. So Rhode Island sets laws and sets interest rate limits to protect Rhode Islanders from predatory and unscrupulous lenders. These rates range from 24 to 36% APR for loans up to $5,000 and 21% APR for loans above that amount. And yet, there are lenders, including the storefront payday lenders and often out-of-state fintech companies that manage to charge Rhode Islanders triple-digit interest. What this legislation tries to do is block efforts by lenders to get around these legal limits and charge Rhode Islanders much higher interest rates, including those triple-digit limits. So the basic idea is that lenders are trying to get around the rules and limits that are set in place to protect Rhode Islanders. This legislation takes a couple of different approaches to preventing that evasion. The one way that they rent-a-bank schemers, as we like to call them, manage to charge triple-digit interest rates is by using a Federal Depository Institution Deregulation and Monetary Control Act, or DDMCA. It's a 1980 law that allows banks in one state to use interest rate caps of their home state to make loans in other states. The rent-a-bank or fintech companies like OppFi and others pay banks in Utah a fee to get them to sign off on the loans to Rhode Islanders, and Utah has no effective interest. However, the 1980 Act includes an option for states to elect to opt out of it, which is what Rhode Island needs to do. And the other way they do anti-evasion is they say that they're not true lenders. The rent-a-bank schemes go to banks in Utah to evade Rhode Island limits, but they also hide the fact that they and not the banks in Utah are the true lenders. They will claim that they merely arrange the loans rather beyond recruiting and arranging, they make the decisions, they service the loans, and perhaps most importantly, they have the quote predominant economic interest on the loan, including the risk or reward. And because these companies are the true lenders and not the out-of-state banks that merely sign on to the loans for a small fee, they should be regulated in Rhode Island as lenders, and that is what this bill aims to do. So the opponents will claim that these products are meeting a need, but it's not clear why Rhode Islanders have a need for any of these products Why would someone need to pay 7 times as much interest on the same loan amount? I am proud to sponsor this along with Rep. Potter, who we've been working on this for a couple of years now, and we hope that this year we can protect more Rhode Islanders and get these bills across the finish line. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Murray. Now I'd like to invite up Representative Potter.
Well, thank you, Alan. Thank you all very much for being here. Thank you to the Coalition for Predatory Lending Reform and to my friends at the Economic Progress Institute for bringing us here today. I want to put this in pretty simple terms. We set interest rates at a limit for a reason. It's to protect people from predatory lending. It's to make sure that financial institutions are not exploiting people. But right now, as Senator Murray explained, there are some companies who get around these protections by using this out-of-state rent-a-bank scheme and charge Rhode Islanders up to 200% annual interest. That's not good business. That's not creating jobs. That's not financial innovation. It's legal loan sharking, and it's dressed up as something else. And it preys deliberately on working class and poor people. Plain and simple. Now, if you listen to these companies, they will tell you that they are meeting a need, that they're helping people, that they're offering a product to people who otherwise would have no other option to get a small dollar loan. But let's be clear about something. When someone is drowning, you don't throw them an anchor to help them. And if someone is drowning in debt, you don't offer them an opportunity to borrow money up to 200% a year. That's exploiting somebody's financial struggle for that company's own benefit. It's profiting off of poverty. And when we have this conversation, I think it is paramount for us to really emphasize and focus on the specific people that we're talking about who get targeted in these schemes. These are poor people. These are working class people. These are seniors who are struggling. These are single parents. These are people who are already struggling to make ends meet, more so than everybody else. And these companies make millions of dollars a year by doing this exact thing. You know, there's an expression, you can't get blood out of a stone. But these are the companies who actually figure out a way to do that. And I also think it's very important that we're clear about the moment that we're in. I'm going to put on my political shoes for a second, okay? We are at a moment in our country when it is so crucial for us, and I will speak for my political party, for us as Democrats, to really stand up and to be bold and to fight back against corporate greed in every aspect that we see it manifest. We have to be the ones to stand up for the most vulnerable people who are getting exploited every day, who don't have paid representation to come up here at the State House and lobby us as legislators, who don't have the money to put together some kind of coalition and campaign to persuade people. It's up to us to do that. And that's why I introduced this bill, to close this rent-to-bank legal loophole and send a message to these companies that loan sharking in Rhode Island will not be tolerated. And if you want to lend in Rhode Island, then you will follow Rhode Island law, plain and simple. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Rep. Potter. I just want to give one example to illustrate this, because there's one thing to note is that while the payday lenders, store payday lenders are doing loans in a few $100s, the rent-to-bank schemers are doing loans in the thousands of dollars. So one company advertises loans for $500 to $4,000 for 9 to 18 months at 160% APR. And so, for example, if you took out a $3,000 loan for 12 months with this company, you would wind up paying $3,175.20 interest on the $3,000 loan. So more in interest than the loan, whereas with Rhode Island's top APR of 24% for that dollar level loan, you'd only pay $404 in interest over a year. So it's $404 versus over $3,100 for that sort of loan. Okay, now I'd like to invite up Rabbi Jeffrey Goldwasser, the spiritual leader of Temple Sinai for over a decade, and he's here to represent the Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Alan just said, my name is Jeffrey Goldwasser. I'm the rabbi at Temple Sinai in Cranston. I'm speaking today on behalf of the Rhode Island Interfaith Coalition to Reduce Poverty. In the Hebrew Bible, the prophet Ezekiel condemns a person who lends at advance interest, going so far as to say that such a person is oppressing the poor and they have practiced fraud. These verses are a guiding authority in Judaism's prohibition against usury. It is a principle and a value shared by people of all faiths. Having a lot of money is no license to take advantage of people who have little. To do so is regarded as a form of theft. Right now, Rhode Island state law not only fails to prohibit the charging of exorbitant and usurious interest rates in lending to the poor, it actually codifies it. Under current law, storefront payday lenders are allowed to charge an effective annual interest rate of 260% when they cash the paychecks of mostly low-income workers. These lenders target low-income communities and are particularly aimed at people of color. These predatory practices are not legal in any other New England state. The Interfaith Coalition is particularly concerned with laws that perpetuate cycles of poverty by keeping impoverished people in unescapable merry-go-rounds of fees and interest rates. Our state's exemption for payday lending is among the worst examples of how the law is designed to keep poor people poor. In a state with a motto of hope emblazoned on its seal, our laws should be aimed at giving people pathways of hope to emerge from poverty. We should be passing and enforcing laws that give people a hand up out of the cycles of fees and penalties, not draining away their hard-earned pay. Today, we are urging the General Assembly to repeal the carve-out in law that gives out-of-state lenders the ability to drain $3 million in payday lending fees each year. Let's make everyone play by the same rules, and let's give people who are struggling to make ends meet the chance and the hope to meet their needs and more. Thank you.
Rabbi Goldwasser, and if I'd like to invite up Leanna Nelson-Davies, the Executive Director of the Economic Progress Institute.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks to all of you for being here again. And we've all said a lot today, and so I'm not going to repeat why reform is needed when it comes to predatory lending. We know it is needed. We know it is the right thing to do. I want to talk a little bit about democracy, because we're not talking about reform that we need to further study any longer. We're really talking about democracy in Rhode Island. Predatory lenders, under a democratic system that we have, are allowed to take advantage of loopholes and rob, Rabbi said, rob vulnerable communities in our state. Legitimize theft. We know this. We've heard the argument year after year, yet we are here. This is one of the issues that can leave a lot of us discouraged, and I'm looking at those in the room who have been fighting for this for years. It leaves you feeling discouraged, not about the reform in and of itself, but about democracy and the democratic process as we're practicing it in this state house. Because that is what this issue is about. This fight leaves people feeling betrayed by those who are supposed to have the best interests of vulnerable communities at heart. That is what we're feeling, quite frankly. We have out-of-state corporations, not even businesses in the state, to say we're choosing between Rhode Island businesses and communities. We're choosing out-of-state corporations, and we're choosing the lobbyists to take millions out of our state and to prey upon our vulnerable populations. It is a shame. It really is. In this climate, Rep. Prada said that Rhode Island is allowing this to happen. And then we were joined forces to call on to Washington, D.C. to not do the same thing. It doesn't make sense that we're continuing to have this argument in Rhode Island. So what I want us to take away from today is the fact that we are still here. We have decided that we will not give up on this fight for reform, and we will not give up on the ideal of democracy in Rhode Island. We are refusing to step back and let vulnerable populations continue to be preyed upon. 260%? Come on now. Do not tell me that you're allowing this robbery to happen because you care about where people can go to fix their cars. That's not true. We need to start telling the truth in this state house. It's not true. 260% on people who are struggling every day. Why? Because democracy is not being allowed in this state house. What I want us to take away is that we continue to refuse to sit silently aside while it's being evaded here. We hope that this year, as we're all screaming democracy is at risk, I am hoping, I am praying that this will be the year that committees are allowed to call for a vote. I'm hoping that this will be a year that we will follow the House leadership in 2023 and bring it to the floor. Because we know what will happen if this is finally brought to the House and Senate floor. I'm hoping we allow democracy to have a place in this state house when it comes to predatory lending. This year, and we're all feeling it, and so I'm feeling differently about this campaign this year. This is a year that requires courage. This is a year that requires leaders of courage. And it's not just calls to protect workers and democracy to Washington, D.C. It requires courage right here in Rhode Island, right here in this state house. We are tired of the excuses. We are hoping every elected legislator will join our legislative champions with courage to stand against this legitimized theft that predatory lenders continue to have. We need those with courage to stand up against these corporations and the lobbyists. We need those with courage to stand for people against what is happening. And I hope we have courage from our General Assembly members to stand for democracy. When you stand for democracy when it hurts, when it might impact you, that is the type of courage we need in 2025. And not just for this reform, for a lot of issues that requires protecting families in Rhode Island. So I thank you all for being here again, for staying the course, and for standing up in a year where we need every single one of us to hang in there and have courage. We will not give up on democracy, and we will not give up on predatory lending reform. Thank you.